It looks like Lockhart may be locked out. What's up, everybody? Brad here. And if you've been following along the Xbox journey of the Scarlet consoles and all that good stuff, you will know that there have been two devices, Anaconda and Lockhart. But if we jump back a couple weeks to E3 2019, Microsoft was talking about Scarlet, and Phil, choosing his words very carefully, talked about a console, not consoles. If we jump back to 2018 when they talked about their next generation consoles, he very clearly said consoles, two devices at minimum, because there was an S on the end of console, multiple devices. Now, jumping ahead to where we are today, he did an interview with Business Insider where he pretty much put the kibosh, if you will, on the Lockhart. He said, hey, we did technically launch two consoles when he was pressed saying, hey, this year you said console, last year console. He said, technically, we did launch two consoles because of the Xbox One All Digital Edition, and then talking now about Scarlet. But even in that, he was joking and kind of laughing a little bit because he knows that that is just kind of stretching of the truth. Because if you go back and look at everything that happened around that time of him using the word consoles, it was talking about next generation stuff. And as we all know, the Xbox One All Digital Edition is not next generation. That aside, everything that I have seen and heard over the past couple days, which everybody's been pinging me asking, is that, hey, Lockhart is not actually moving forward, in that it has actually been removed from a lot of the roadmaps and documentation referring to the next generation stuff, which is only going by the name of Scarlet now. Anaconda isn't showing up nearly as much as it used to prior to this information. Now, the question becomes, why did Microsoft make this decision? Was there some big change of plans because of Sony and blah, blah, blah? Well, first off, guys, keep in mind, we are more than a year and a half away from the next generation console release. Things are going to change again. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 to 8 months, or 12 months for that matter. Things are going to change frequently. We are still in the very early days. That being said, here is what I have heard, and some other people have actually heard very similar things. First off, when you tell a developer to build a game for a next generation console, and there are two options, let's just say Lockhart and Anaconda, what you do is you build to make sure that it's going to run well on Lockhart and then scale it up to work well on Anaconda, because it's easier to scale up than it is to scale down. And so Microsoft was getting a lot of feedback from developers who have access to this information in the dev kits saying, hey, we're going to build for Lockhart, and then we'll just scale it up, and hopefully it looks good, and hopefully it runs well, and all that good stuff at 4K. And that is not what Microsoft wanted to hear. They wanted to hear, right, that you're going to have these great 1080p experiences and the great 4K, and developers like, look, we have limited resources, we're going to build for the low end and then scale it up because we know it will work on the high end. And that is not what Microsoft wants to hear going into the next generation console wars. Also, the other thing I have heard too is that Microsoft has actually been a little bit more pleased with some of the performance that they are seeing from xCloud. Granted, it is not perfect yet. There are still some big challenges they have to overcome, but the rate at which they are improving is actually outpacing some of their own internal estimates, is what I've heard. It's hard to justify or verify all that. But anyways, the idea being that Lockhart was supposed to serve the lower end. It was going to be cheaper than the Anaconda device. And so the problem is that it's actually becoming more of a barrier to ship Lockhart because of xCloud. xCloud is actually going to be what Microsoft believes is going to be the easier way for people to get into console-like gaming rather than Lockhart. Right? If you think about it, if xCloud is really good and the latency is where it needs to be and the actual gameplay and usability is pretty dang good, then the idea of shipping two consoles, one that is making it more price sensitive to get into the Xbox family, makes less sense. So to me, what I interpret from all the things that I've heard from different people is that Microsoft is growing increasingly confident that xCloud will be able to fill that lower end, and for people who want the absolute best console gaming experience, well, you can go out and buy the Anaconda, and for everybody else, you can either do it on your PC, just streaming it over the internet, which, as we know, is Microsoft's future and where they want to be. There's also other considerations as well, if you pile it on top of the xCloud news, is that Microsoft doesn't necessarily like making hardware. The margins is actually how much money Microsoft saves or puts into the bank, I should say net income, when they sell a piece of hardware. It is much, much, much lower than when they sell, like, say, a game on a percentage basis or software as a service. So for Microsoft not shipping a lower end console next generation, it actually streamlines things and probably is making some of the overlords at Microsoft, like Amy Hood and Satya, all them more happy because it's less hardware Microsoft is shipping, and they can then focus on just one console and then getting xCloud to everywhere and making it a really good experience rather than having this Lockhart sit in the middle of, it's like, because if you think about it, it's like, okay, who should buy Lockhart? Well, people who don't want to pay as much money. Well, if people don't want to pay as much money, xCloud is probably a much better solution. And if Microsoft is confident that that xCloud solution would be just as good or close to what Lockhart would provide, Lockhart becomes redundant, and that's one less piece of hardware that Microsoft can sell. And if you also look at the language Phil has been talking about, he's not interested in selling consoles. He's interested in selling games and making games available everywhere. That again goes into the idea of making less hardware and games better, playable, and a wider breadth of reach. So that is what I'm hearing about Lockhart. I've been asked a lot about that. So I don't think Lockhart is going to ship. At least right now, it's been put on hold and it's been removed some of the projections of where Microsoft is headed. And so that is the current state of Scarlett and the Xbox next generation plans.